have a very bloody history. Manhattan in New York of former President Donald Trump. It's the first ever criminal trial of a former US president, or in fact even of a president, and he's set to defend himself against charges of falsifying business records to conceal hush money, which was paid to former porn star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election. Let's bring in John Quinn. He's a trial lawyer and a partner in the law firm Quinn Emanuel in Los Angeles. Thanks very much indeed for being with us. So far, what do you make of the trial?
Election. It's a process where the lawyers have an opportunity to talk to the citizens who have been called in as the veneer and ask questions and try to make sure that the jury that is seated is not a biased jury to the extent possible, and to try to ferret out any claim, the bases for bias and for excusing jurors from serving.
And I understand they've had quite a lengthy questionnaire, haven't they, to try and weed out people who might be biased?
That's typical, that especially in a case like this, that the judge will permit the lawyers to give the whole veneer. Those are all the people who have been called in potentially to serve on the jury, to answer questions, so that they're not going into this process cold. They know something about the people who are in the courtroom.
And how serious would you say this trial is compared with the others that former President Trump is facing?
Well, this is one of 4 criminal cases that he faces. It's the first one to go to trial. The others are in Washington, D.C., in Georgia, in Miami. Look, I mean, it's a criminal case. His liberty is potentially at stake. These are all very, very important.
His liberty at stake, talk us through what the potential sentence might be if it does go against him.
I mean, I don't know what the potential sentences or the guidelines are for these particular offenses under New York law. I just don't know that offhand. But, I mean, he does definitely face the possibility that if he's convicted, he'll be sentenced to prison.
And we've heard in the first few minutes of the trial, while it's been going on this afternoon, is the prosecutor Joshua Steinglass talking about Trump's recent attacks on potential witnesses and suggesting that Trump violated the limited gag order in the case. What do you make of that?
Well, that would be up to the judge to decide as to whether he's crossed a line there. I mean, I'm not familiar with exactly what the claim is, that the argument that was made in court on that this morning, but that's an issue that will be presented to the judge, and the judge will have to decide.
So more broadly in this situation, what are the prosecutors looking for, and how will the defense try to manage this case, do you think?
Well, at this point, they're picking the jury. So, I mean, both sides are looking to try to ferret out, using their best judgment, what jurors might be best for them on the jury and what jurors, not so good for them, either for the government or for the former president, and try to exercise challenges in order to try to do what they can to try to make sure that they have a jury that they think is as favorable as possible to their side, or at least not biased against them.
And tell us a bit about the case, the original issue. I mean, so that what he's charged with is 34 counts of falsifying business records to cover up a $130,000 payment that his former personal lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, made to Daniels in the last days of the 2016 campaign. Because actually, it's the business records is the issue. Tell us about why they've picked on that in particular.
Well, I mean, this is a New York state law that relates to accuracy in certain business records. That's not really, I mean, in itself, that would just be a misdemeanor. But what is the potential real exposure here is the link to campaign finance. The government's theory is that these are payments that were made in order to preserve the president's candidacy, and therefore should have been disclosed as campaign expenditures. And that's where the real exposure comes. That's what makes this case not just a misdemeanor case, but potentially a felony.
So, in fact, the hush money itself wouldn't have necessarily been a problem, but it was the covering it up. Is that right?
No, not necessarily. I mean, the government's theory is these were monies that were paid and improperly accounted for, but monies that were paid in aid of his candidacy to be president. So, in effect, they were campaign expenditures. And the failure to report those as such is a campaign finance violation. That would be a felony. That is the government's theory.
And tell us a little bit about the judge in this case. What can we expect?
The judge it's obviously an extremely high-profile case. I mean, the judge knows that all eyes in the U.S. and many eyes around the world will be paying attention here. So I think the judge has a reputation of being fair, and I think this judge is going to be very, very careful in the rulings.
How much more difficult is it to have a court case when there is a kind of element of circus, if you like? I mean, we're all watching these pictures at the moment, and there's people camped outside, flying flags, and as you say, every moment of this is being monitored and reported on. How difficult is it to handle cases like this?
I think it's a challenge for the judge to keep control of what's going on in the courtroom, and also to some degree what's going on outside the courtroom, to the extent that might implicate what is going on in the courtroom, hence the sort of modified gag order. So I think it's going to be a real challenge for both sides. It'll be interesting to see to the extent to which the former president tries to exploit this and turn this into sort of a public event. And I think we can expect that his supporters will step up, and we'll be hearing from them, and that'll be all part of the background to this trial.
Do you think that he will take the stand himself?
I think he says he will, but we'll see. It's kind of unusual for a criminal defendant to take the stand in their own defense. Oftentimes that's thought to be extremely risky, but I think President Trump has shown that he's a risk taker.
And in your experience with these things, talk us through the time scale, because we talked about, you said that they've got to find the jurors, first of all, and establish that. Are we talking about a couple of weeks for that process?
Could well. I mean, in a case like this, where you're trying to find jurors who haven't already formed opinions, I mean, just think about that for a minute. A very large percentage of the population knows about this case, has heard about it for some time, and has probably formed opinions already. So it's going to be very, very hard to find people, who don't have preconceptions, or at least are prepared to set them aside and make decisions based on the evidence. I think this is a case where the jury selection itself could take longer than the trial.
And it is also a criminal case, isn't it? And I understand that former President Trump will have to actually be in court for the proceedings. He can't just be an absent sort of party while it's being decided in his absence.
Yeah, I don't know that he needs to be there every day. I mean, I'm just not familiar with this particular judge's practice, but certainly it would not be good for him to be absent.
And if you were advising former President Trump, what would you be saying to him at this stage?
Well, I think he's well represented. He has an excellent lawyer and legal team, and my advice to him would be to listen to your lawyers.
And he's not always done that, has he?
He has not always done that, apparently.
Okay. And what do you think are the risks for him in terms of the way he handles these kind of things?
Well, I mean, he needs to look. If he's not respectful to the court and to the proceeding and to the jurors, that's going to be a problem for him. So I think he's got to respect the process. He disagrees very much with the prosecution and the prosecution's motives, the entire motives for bringing the case. But he needs to be prepared to defend this case on the merits.
Tell us a little bit about the system there. So even if he is convicted, is it right to say that he could still go on and win the White House if that were to happen for him?
There's no law against it. I mean, we're in totally uncharted territory. There's no law that says a convicted felon cannot serve as president of the United States. There's a predictable pattern of events that will happen. If he is convicted, he will almost certainly be released on his own recognizance. He won't go immediately to jail. There'll have to be a pre-sentencing report that is done by the probation department. That can take months. Then he'll get a date where he's to show up in court. The pre-sentencing report is to help inform the judge's decision about what sentence he should get. There'll come a point where he actually has a date when he needs to appear in court to be sentenced. Then he will probably be given time to put his affairs in order, and he'll be given a date where he's supposed to report to a prison, wherever that is in the system. So this whole process even after a conviction, can take many, many months.
And briefly, John Quinn, do you think he's likely to face jail?
I think it's very hard to say. A lot is going to turn on the credibility of Michael Cohen, his former lawyer. There is a lot of material that Mr. Trump, the President Trump's lawyers have to impeach Mr. Cohen. He's going to be a key witness. I think this is a case, especially because of the vulnerability of Mr. Cohen as a witness. I think this is a case of the 4 cases he faces. I think this is the one that he has the highest probability of winning in and being acquitted.
John Quinn, trial lawyer and partner in the law firm Quinn Emanuel in Los Angeles. Thanks very much indeed for talking to us here on the BBC.
Pleasure.
You're watching BBC News.